So welcome everybody to this very short video that is going to recap on some of the areas covered in the photography classes as part of the community education programme. If you haven't taken part in any of these classes, don't worry, you might find something of use in these short instructional videos. So to kick things off, this first one is going to look back at some of the areas of composition that have been covered in the class, and in this short video I'm just going to look at three techniques that you could use. So the first one we're going to look at is framing, and by framing I'm not referring obviously to the physical frame that you put around your finished or your printed photograph. I'm talking rather about frames that you can create within your photograph. So this particular shot of Nina taken on a nice summer's day, rather than standing out on the edge of the road and just taking a photograph of the church and the buildings in front, I simply stood back in under the archway of the Heritage Centre, as it is, to create that frame around the photograph. And this has the advantage of keeping your eye within the photograph itself. Your eye isn't going wandering out of the edges of the picture looking for something else. It's focused in on the church and the building in front. So it's a simple framing technique. It's used here as well in this photograph of Trinity College. So rather than standing out in front of that monument, I'm simply using the archway on the entrance building to create that frame. And here again in Clonmacnoise, one of the most photographed monuments, I suppose, in the Midlands, the round tower at Clonmacnoise is photographed this time through the window of a building that is also on the site. And as well as improving the composition of the photograph, it also adds a little bit to the story, gives us a little bit more information about the site itself. So it's simply framing the round tower within the stone window. Frames don't have to be archways or windows, they can be natural vegetation as well. So in this shot of the boat on the lake, the branches at the top are used as a frame, as a top frame, and they have the advantage of cutting out some of that quite bland and maybe washed out sky. So they help, again, focus your eye down on the main object in the photograph, which is the boat, obviously. The same technique used in a shot after the sun has gone down on Lough Derg. The branches are used to, again, focus the eye back in on the main part of the photograph. And this one, the waterfall in Carrigahorig, the photograph is taken through the branches of the cherry blossom tree, which have the effect of adding a natural frame again to the photograph. So rather than standing out in front of the waterfall, I simply stood back, took the photograph through the branches of the tree. So one final one is the monument in Gary Kennedy. So the frame this time, the frame doesn't have to be all around the photograph as we're seeing. In this case it's over there on the right hand side, and it has the advantage of, again, keeping the eye back in the centre of the photograph. So that's framing. So the next one to look at is foreground interest or foreground attraction, and this is where we put something in front of the main object of the photograph. So here we're looking at the buildings obviously, but by simply looking down, seeing that there's daffodils on the ground, getting down low and using them in the foreground, it adds something to the composition of the photograph. Likewise with this church in the village of Kilburn, the flowers in the planters are used to add some foreground interest or foreground attraction. Now you may notice as well in this photograph, the church is framed by the trees, and it's not unusual, the more you get into photography, where you'll find yourself using not just one technique for composition, but maybe 2, 3 or 4 within the same photograph. So here you have both framing and foreground interest. This shot from the Claddagh in Galway, the boat with the name Claddagh written on it obviously, and the rope, they're used as the foreground interest, and the Claddagh then is seen in the background. The shot of the water lilies, they are the foreground interest, so there's something that they add more to the photograph, and very often the items that can add something to the composition, they can sometimes be literally right under our feet. It's only a question looking down and saying, well, if I get down lower and I add those in, will they add something to the photograph? So finally then, for this video, is the rule of thirds, probably the most spoken about compositional technique used. So it's basically comes from, if you take a photograph and you divide it into 3 elements vertically and 3 elements horizontally, they give us the key golden points, or you see the circles on the photograph there show the top left third, top right third, bottom right third, and top and bottom left third. So the thinking behind this is that if you have one dominant element in the photograph, that you don't position it in the center, you move it a little bit off center, and generally speaking, what's regarded as the best place for that is 2/3 of the way across the photograph, or 1/3 of the way from the end. With this shot of the cottage in Connemara, it's positioned in the top right third of the photograph, and it just adds to the overall appeal of the photograph rather than having it right in the center. This shot of the red umbrella taken with a drone, again, it's not positioned in the center, it's approximately, in this case, in the top right third. This one of the fisherman on Lough Derg, again, not in the center, but as you're probably predicting what I'm going to say now, it's in the bottom right third. So just two, and a quick recap of the 3 techniques we've looked at then. So the first one we looked at is framing. So standing back into a doorway or an arch or under a tree and using that as a frame for the photograph. Second technique was foreground interest or foreground attraction, where we're putting something, usually something that is probably down low, putting it in the foreground of the photograph. And finally then, the rule of thirds. So not placing the element in the center, but moving it to the right-hand third, or to the top right third, or the bottom right third, or wherever you think will make it look a little bit better. So there's 3 simple techniques that, regardless of the type of camera that you're using, or if you're just using your phone, they can make a real difference to the quality of your photographs. And it's worth, with the weather improving now and with people having a little bit of time on their hands, it might be worth just heading outdoors and trying out some of these techniques and see what impact they can have on your photographs. So that's it for this video. Thank you for listening.